Hi, this is Trivial Punk, and we're here to read another Trivial Punk original, The Labors of Hell. Some days we wake and wish we were dreaming. Others we dream of nothing but being awake. Even with our eyes wide open, it's the best most of us can hope for. Yet few are fortunate to have the blindfold ripped away. Jeremy didn't know it, but he was lucky that on this particular night he was afflicted by the first condition. His wife was away on business, and he found himself tossing and turning in an empty bed, chasing sleep. Unfortunately, dreams cannot find those who are already drifting. It was under these circumstances that Jeremy found himself visited by a tall, red-faced man in a finely tailored pinstripe suit and hat, wearing a toothy grin. "Hello, Jeremy!" lilted the man. "Good evening and fair greetings. I suppose you might be a bit surprised by my interruption. Your struggle with the duvet was valiant, but all things must end." Had those last words possessed a more sinister intonation than the others? Jeremy wasn't sure. The man's appearance had thrown him off his game a bit. All right. "What the hell are you doing in my house? Who are you?" Now. While I'm sure my presence here is a fair mystery, I assure you that, like most mysteries, once you understand a bit more, the answer is delightfully mundane. So relax and don't do anything too hasty. Of course, by this point in the red-faced man's calm speech, Jeremy had had time to shout a few more expletives, threaten him repeatedly, and place his hand firmly on the fish that had taken the place of the mobile phone that sat faithfully on his bedside table. Of course, I understand entirely, but you really must take a few deep breaths and calm yourself. I've come to offer you a promotion." Every muscle in Jeremy's body was taut and braced for immediate action, but the man's voice and mannerisms were beginning to work their way under his skin, calming him. "All right," he growled darkly between deep breaths. "I'm listening. Talk quickly." The man chuckled. First, let's take a quick tour of your potential place of employment." With a snap of his fingers, the world melted away. From its mingled essence rose a barren mesa overlooking a translucent sea that bubbled and frothed with the pleading screams of the damned. Jeremy blinked and promptly joined them. Shh. You'll wake my little cherry. He's so hard to get to sleep once he gets wind of fresh meat. You're screaming loud enough to wake the... Don't say it! A panicked Jeremy shot back. Don't even joke. I can't be here right now. I just can't. I'm an atheist, for God's sake. Ha, the man said dryly. Well, for heaven's sake, let me tell you, definitively, you don't have to believe in anything for these rocky, finely carved canyons to believe in you. Now, collect yourself. If you're to be familiarized with your surroundings well enough to take over your office in time for me to make my next appointment, then we must move quickly. Another toothy grin. Welcome, my dear Jeremy, to the Office of Repentance and Emancipation. With a grand sweep of his arms, he proclaimed to the wailing air, "We've been busy for what seems like forever, carving and digging ORE out of the very rock itself." Jeremy raised an eyebrow. He was more than a little impressed. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you our facilities and give you a personal taste of just what it is we do here." That was it. Jeremy realized exactly what the man reminded him of. He was the spitting image of a used car salesman. He glanced at his suit. Perhaps, but a very successful used car salesman. Great at peddling warranties and upgrades. "Coming!" Jeremy blinked. "Oh, sorry, coming." Treading carefully over the crumbling path, he did his best to keep up with the confident strides of the red-faced man. After a time, they came to a winding staircase that led down into the heart of what looked like a solid stone outcropping. Here at the Office of Repentance and Emancipation, we handle an immense volume of customers. So in order to be as efficient and economical as possible, we have divided our operation into 7, count 'em, 7 different departments with several subcategories to ease product dispensation. However, as that can get pretty complicated, we'll stick to the 7 main offices for now. The confident drawl echoed from somewhere below and in front of Jeremy. As quickly as he could, while ducking to avoid dashing his head against the low-hanging ceiling, he made his way down the rocky staircase. Suddenly, he bumped into a fleshy, unforgiving something. I'm so sorry. I do forget how much people depend on light. A flame and a grin split the darkness, revealing hundreds and hundreds of fleshless, laughing faces. They surrounded Jeremy, in the walls, in the ceiling. The staircase itself was cobbled together using thousands of empty, ever-grinning skulls, their sockets leering from the shadows, mocking him. His neck-shocked step found nothing but air, and Jeremy plunged downwards, his flailing body easily sidestepped in one smooth, polished movement by the red-faced man. Down he rolled, bones snapping and muscles ripping under the onslaught of the hard, uncaring faces beneath his twisting, pain-racked form. Until, finally, a white glow slashed into his fading awareness. Truly, he was a pitiful thing now. Bones stretched and pierced flesh. Brains drizzled through cracks, and blood covered every available inch of stained, broken skin. It was in this way that Jeremy might have died, had his bones not decided to snap back in place, his grey matter returned from its brief holiday, and his skin decided to give it another go. "Ah!" he screamed through the excruciating process. "What the Yes, the man cried, clutching his fedora in one hand as he tossed his head and arms out triumphantly. "Our entire operation is built on people. This whole industry is fueled, operated, and run by the lives and passions of people." He drew his hands in and slapped his hat back into place. A bit more literally than some might expect, but I think you've got the stomach for it. Jeremy rolled onto his side, pulled himself shakily to his knees, and vomited onto the gravel-strewn ground. Thankfully, he had left the lipless grins back in that godforsaken staircase. Now that you've pulled yourself together, Jeremy let out a groan completely unrelated to the fading pain in his body. Take a minute and look around. If you're not up to it yet, you don't have to say a thing. Just sit back and take it all in. Jeremy opened his mouth to speak, but it stopped on a gaping vowel, hanging open in shock at the horrendous sight he would forever be afflicted with. Before him stretched a vast chamber filled with thousands, millions, of red-streaked, undulating masses of humanity that were fighting, scraping, and crawling over each other to reach the precipice of one of the thousands of mounds of writhing flesh that stretched all the way to the ceiling. At the top of each floated a winged figure cloaked in light, arms stretched out in triumph, being torn apart by the vicious hands of those that had clawed their way to the top. Each angelic figure wore around its neck a magnificent glowing neckpiece of an ethereal material Jeremy didn't recognize. This, you see, is where we process our most envious customers. The man snapped his fingers, and a glowing figure popped into being before them. It began a triumphant ascent before he clamped it to the ground under a fine leather shoe. You see, these fabulous neckpieces are the cause of the glow in the wings. He or she that possesses one rises, momentarily, above the rabble, until that very same rabble rises up to snatch it away. This rise to apparent glory makes them seem absolutely ecstatic. However, what one might not see is, well, watch. It was only a matter of moments before the glowing form was assaulted by a large group that tore the neckpiece from its limp, bloody form. The gleeful individual that slipped it over his head became bathed in a light so bright that it defied observation. "Behold!" the man cried, brandishing his snapping fingers at the light. "The price of success and adulation!" The light faded out and the once victorious figure resolved from the blinding radiance. Only now it was under a brutal assault from the awakened jewelry. Spikes of the finest white gold forced their way under his skin and began to weave around his collarbone. Wings of the purest white began to form, piercing bone and rigid sinew, forcing their way into his back and onto his spine. Hooks of the finest diamonds stretched and held his features in a mask of perfect exultation. Finally, a searing beam of heat that caused Jeremy to sweat from 10 feet away shone down and focused on the angelic figure as it tested its wings and began to rise. They can feel the pain, being stabbed or trampled, but their bodies heal. You experienced it. True death is impossible here. So, on they climb. Many of them have been at this a long time. I'd wager most have risen more than a few times. Trampling or laceration. Neither is an absolute. They don't have to scramble. Some even stop for a time to sit and think. Always, always, always they see someone rise, their eyes gleam, and they go right back to it. A wistful smile cracked the edges of the man's lips. Some, I suppose, learn and they get to move on. Others, well, you see. Wiping fresh vomit on his sleeve, Jeremy replied, "Yeah, I see what you mean." Onward and downward, he strode along, grinning through the fray as Jeremy carefully picked his way over a few of the recently trampled. "You're a businessman, aren't you? You can't say clawing your way to the top doesn't intrigue you. Of course, I could offer you the mantle now." One of the finely crafted neck pieces dangled from the gloved hand he extended. Yeah, no thanks," Jeremy replied. "Good choice." He laughed heartily. "Besides, it's hardly any fun if someone just hands it to you." Oh god, I'm running out of disk space.